What do I need to tell a potential or new employer about my illness, and when?
Okay, well, this is one of those classic questions that people often ask if they're looking for a job and wondering what they should say and when and how. You're actually not required to tell your employer anything. So let's just be clear about that. There's no law that says you have to disclose these things. But it does depend on you. So, for example, if you are applying for a job and you know that you're going to need some continuing adjustments because of continuing pain or fatigue or a number of appointments you need to have, then I think it's important to tell your employer that you've had cancer and that you're going to need some adjustments to be put in place. If you're perfectly well, you're several years post-treatment, you may have the occasional appointment, you're pretty much okay. There's no requirement really to say anything. The issue is when you say these things as well. Now, employers are not allowed legally to ask you any questions about your health unless they're either having some sort of monitoring process where they're keeping account of how many disabled people they're employing, or if there's a specific role that requires a physical ability that they need to know about your health particularly. But a standard job in the UK, you should not be asked about your health in any event. The issue is, if you did mention your cancer before an offer of employment, an employer could withdraw seeing you or talking to you, and you might wonder if it was because you'd mentioned your cancer, but there'd be no way of proving that. If you wait until after you've had an offer of employment, then clearly if the offer is withdrawn, it would be because of your cancer, and then you would have a case to take to a tribunal about discrimination. In the end, you might not want to work for them anyway if they're doing that to you, but it's all really in the end a matter of personal judgment and personal opinion. As someone who used to work in HR, I prefer people to be upfront and to let from the outset how they are. But I know a lot of people are very nervous about saying anything and would rather not say anything at all, or would rather wait until an offer's been made, and that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
Would you say that there's any danger if you don't tell the potential employer until you've had that job offer made, that they might feel a little bit annoyed?
Absolutely, and that's why I say my personal preference would be always to tell people and to be told at an early stage, but it's a breach of trust. So to find yourself in a position that you've hired someone and then to find out that you've got all the way through this process and then they've told you that they've had cancer, they made significant time off for treatment, you would feel a bit disappointed that they hadn't told you that sooner, and it doesn't start the employment relationship off on a good footing. But I can understand there are some people who are too nervous, too worried to tell people sooner, and in the end it has to be a matter of personal judgment.
Okay, so would you say that if you do mention it before an offer has been made, there might be a danger, even if you're protected, that the potential employer might not offer you the job because of it?
There's always that danger, and there are as many employers or recruiters as there are people in this world. Clearly, if you can build a relationship up with the organisation, or you know them well before, while you're being interviewed or before you're being interviewed, that helps. And some people, you often may have through networking know who's doing the interviewing. They may know you've had cancer. But I say my preference is always to be upfront about these things. My view is honesty is the best policy. But there are a number of people I meet who say they wouldn't dare tell an employer about their cancer until at all, or at least until past the offer stage, and I have to respect their views.
Okay. And if you have decided not to tell the potential employer during the interview process, for example, but they do bring up a sort of direct question about your health, Do you have any strategies to suggest to deal with that sort of thing?
If people bring up a direct question about health before job offer, I mean, again, it's all a matter of judgment at the interview. If you refuse to answer, the employer might well suspect there's something wrong and that you're hiding, and then it makes it even more difficult if you need to mention your cancer later on. So my view would be to answer the question and leave it at that. But most employers shouldn't be asking any health questions until after they've made you the offer, and when they're potentially just asking you about what benefits you're eligible for. You know, if you're applying for, I don't know, private health or, you know, income protection schemes, people need to know your health in order to consider you for those programs.
And do you have any advice around social media, the fact that apparently some employers will look at your profiles?
That's another thing to be aware of. So I'd say two things. Is that A is to, if you've been all over Facebook or Twitter about your cancer, and you clearly haven't been hiding it, why would you, from your friends and colleagues on social media, then it's likely these days that your employer might well have heard about this. So beware if you don't mention it, or if you even deny you've had cancer. The other thing is to be aware that increasingly companies are taking references on people, often through third-party agencies, before they offer you a job. So if you've lied about an aspect of your employment to cover up a gap in your employment, then that employer is perfectly at right to withdraw a job offer because you've falsified your application. So you do need to be careful if you lie. And in fact, I would say to anyone applying for a job, never lie. It doesn't get you anywhere. You can possibly be economical with the truth, but don't tell a falsehood, because if you're found out, the offer can legitimately be withdrawn.
Would that even cover if you were perhaps only able to work 3 days, 4 days, 2 days a week, and you applied for a 5-day-a-week job? Would you recommend only applying for jobs advertised for the days that you feel you can do?
Well, the issue there is that if you apply for a 5-day-a-week job and you can only do 3, the question is, are you asking for 3 because it's a reasonable adjustment? If you're asking for that, you can legitimately ask for it. I think it's an interesting grey area in employment law if the job's been advertised at 5 days a week, but you can only work 3 for a significant period of time. If it's for a short period, if the employer's seen you, interviewed you, and really keen to hire you, they may be very happy to accommodate that request. So it depends on the job and the employer. But if an employer's been through the whole rigmarole of interviewing you, maybe doing some tests and all the rest of it, taken references, really keen for you to start, if suddenly they find out you can't do the full days, depends, you know. Some might say, oh, we're so desperate to hire George, yes, of course we'll take him because we know that in a month's time he'll be able to do whatever. But if you're saying for the next year I can only do 3 days, they might say, And I think then the issue is it's a bit of a grey area legally as to, and it might be seen as reasonable, commercially reasonable for them to turn you down because they can't, it was a 5-day-a-week job, and for a long period of time to accommodate 3 years wouldn't be viable. It would fail the test of reasonableness.
Thank you.